Unexpected, like many of us, unexpected road construction that got into our way. We welcome you to this committee room. Want to let you know that this will not be live streamed, but a recording of this meeting will be available after today's meeting on the YouTube channel, the board's YouTube channel. Please note that the West Committee Room has room-wide microphones, so they can allow any speaker to be heard both in the room and in the Zoom meeting and on the recording. The audio feed is really good, and it picks up all audio from the room, including side conversations you might have. Given that, please try to limit any side conversations, including those of us around the table, and members of the community who are here with us today in the audience. Additionally, the regents and presenters, given that we will not use the room's touch-to-speak microphones that are in front of you, please project when you speak so your remarks are clear on the official record. With that, we'll go ahead and move to our first agenda item. So the first agenda item is the review of our work plan and priorities for the year. And we'll go through this relatively briefly, and I'll ask Jacob you for comments after I make some. But the 2023-24 committee work plan has been in your materials. Vice Chair Ruth Johnson and I met with President Toller to discuss the priorities of the committee and work together to create a work plan that you have before you. As you can see, the work plan provides us multiple opportunities to talk about the governor's task force at the University of Minnesota, focusing on academic health and mHealth Fairview. It highlights the work that the university is doing across the state and important partnerships with M physicians and CentraCare. We also included topics that will help build our understanding of academic medical centers and the clinical market. With that, is there anything else you'd like to highlight, Vice President Toller?
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. I'm delighted that this committee is in existence. I'm delighted with the focus on the priorities of the university and the regional ones and the relentless execution that we will follow. And I look forward to integrate the missions of the university along with the 6 health science schools and the regional healthcare systems. And I would like to thank you and Jason over there for his guidance, in preparation of all the materials.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to preserve some time because we have some discussion topics later in the agenda. So I will request of any members of the committee to send me any addendums or comments about the work plan that Regent Johnson and I worked with Dean Toller. So there we have that. All right. So moving on to our next agenda item. This is a follow-up for the affiliation agreement with CentraCare. So we want to take action on the academic affiliation agreement today, understand it a little bit better. We'll also understand, as you'll see later, some of the financial underpinnings of this very exciting collaboration between the University of Minnesota and CentraCare. So I'll ask Vice President Toller again to walk us through the changes that has been made since we reviewed it in our September meeting.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Holman and CFO Mike Blair in the audience to join us today. We intend to talk today more than present together, as we have done several times to this board, and we would like to allow time for questions and discussion as we go forward. We all know the reasons why is it so fundamental for the state of Minnesota to have more of the rural physicians that are trained in the rural area of the greater Minnesota. And I am energized and grateful to the CentraCare team for being so collaborative and so aligned with everything that we have been working on together. This is truly a unique combination of interest and shared goals. This is unique on the whole national scene, that we have had such a friendly and effective and prudent in financial and operation ways healthcare system with which we can pair the virtues and values of the healthcare training that we provide at the University of Minnesota. So we have built all the components of this agreement together. This has been refreshing. This has been effective. There have been very little back and forth because we have had these shared goals and shared priorities that we started with together. And so quickly, I will review a couple of the changes that we have made in the agreements. And I hope that AAC Council Kratz is in the audience somewhere. There she is. Hi, Susan. I may need to call a friend at one of these points. So we have first added language in the accreditation section noting that a Higher Education Learning Commission is a part of our accreditation. Second, we have clarified that this is not a quote-unquote university campus. We do not have a chancellor at this location, while recognizing the needs of the characterization. This is a regional medical school campus for the LCME purposes, which is our main accreditor. And we have changed the reference from the University of Minnesota Medical School St. Cloud campus to University of Minnesota Medical School St. Cloud Regional Medical Campus. Words matter, language matters. And we ensured that the term undergraduate in this sense refers really to, I know, I was unintentionally confusing it that way, only refers to undergraduate medical education. And finally, we have finalized the term of the agreement to an initial 15-year term with 5-year renewals thereafter, with a 36-month notice for non-renewal. And I'm grateful to the President Ettinger for his guidance on this as well. We have also added language requiring the approval of a financial plan, and I will turn it back to Chair Wheeler to discuss this part of the process, and our CFO, Bill Siebert, in the audience will discuss the financial planning in more detail.
Great, thank you, Vice President Toller. So, and those of us who are at the Governor's Task Force, I know we'll have that on our agenda later, but boy, was it ever emphasized about the gap in terms of workforce generally in healthcare, but particularly in the rural areas. So that's another reason why I think we're excited about this. I think we raised questions about, the excitement was there for sure, but we wanted to make sure we were exercising our fiduciary, our stewardship duties to make sure that there was a solid financial footing for this too. So that's wanting to do our due diligence, Vice Chair Johnson, Board Chair Mayron, and I thought it would be best to involve the whole board in that diligence, starting with kind of a look today at what the financial underpinnings are so we can be good stewards of that resource. It'll then turn to, making sure that this committee feels comfortable with it, and then the Finance and Operations Committee chaired by Regent Hipp should be comfortable with it too before its final full approval. So today we're approving the academic affiliation agreement with the look to follow for finance and operations in the entire board. So with that, Bill, I'll invite you up to give this committee that presentation. And Bill Siebert, just for those of you who aren't familiar with Bill, is the Associate Dean and Chief Financial Officer of the medical school and the CFO for M Physicians. So thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. So good morning. One of the things that I wanted to do was to have this opportunity to explain not only my excitement, but my confidence in the financial sustainability of this plan that we're actually contemplating. So the key question is this financially sustainable? Is it a financially sustainable plan? And one of the things that the Dean was just talking about is how collaborative the work has been between the two organizations. That is the underpinnings that you need in order to be successful. It also is alignment with the strategic goals of CenturyCare. And we've reviewed CenturyCare's financial position and their operations, and they're very strong financially. We consider the projections that are a part of this affiliation agreement to be very conservative, and I'll go through why that is so. There's also a joint philanthropic plan to acquire donations to cover some of the budgeted deficits that we have actually projected. And then The medical school, the University of Minnesota Medical School has done this before. We've done it here and in Duluth, and so those operations give us also confidence that this is a financially sound decision. So when one of the things that we did is we determined or generated some financial projections on this affiliation. And once fully operational, what we saw was that there will most likely be a $1.5 million deficit on an annual basis. So in order to come to that determination, we engaged a outside entity, consultants, to work with us on those projections. We like to get a third party some of the time to agree or help us with some of the thinking that we actually have. And the reason that we think these projections are conservative is because the projections only have us having income for tuition. There is no philanthropy actually put into the projections, even though there is a philanthropic plan, which I'll go through in a little bit. And then there's no reallocation of the $10 million, which we have received for the legislative funding. Our plan is to ask for some reallocation of that funding in order to be able to help with some of the startup costs and some of the operations. So that would be technically another way of getting revenue to mitigate the $1.5 million annual deficit. And the key aspect is that CentraCare has committed to covering all budgeted deficits. So that $1.5 million on an annual basis, they have committed to covering that deficit. I wanted to also talk about the composition of the faculty and staff that would be at full operations. We're looking at approximately 5.25 full-time equivalent, academic full-time equivalents for year 1 and 2 students. And then for year 3 and 4 students, it's 6.75 academic full-time equivalents, which that you will see salary and other aspects because of that. We anticipate that they will be adjunct unless, of course, we have some specialty or requirement that would require that we get faculty members from either the Twin Cities or Duluth to help out with the curriculum. And then if we're performing any clinical work, they will most likely not be employed by the UNP, University of Minnesota Physicians Employed, which is our physicians practice. They would be employed there at CentraCare. However, again, if there is special requirements, we can actually make changes. So being collaborative, flexible in how we're actually implementing this plan. And then the anticipated number of staff is 10.2 at full implementation. So one of the reasons that why a CFO is really confident in the financial part of this agreement is how strong the financial status of CentraCare is. They've positive net operating income in fiscal year 22 and 23 when all of its many of its peers have seen negative operating. The net income also grew over those years by 110 million. They have 1.6 billion in net assets. The long-term debt is relatively small comparatively at 537 million, and they have 238 days cash on hand, which is really a nice opportunity to be able to weather any storms that might precipitate. So I'm going to talk real briefly about the philanthropic plan as it currently stands. CentraCare Foundation and University of Minnesota Foundation together are working on a joint campaign to raise $50 million. So 10 million of that would be earmarked for scholarships and student support, but you'd also have the remaining 40 million. I have inside the package that we've sent, there is a description of this philanthropic plan. So if we think about it, if we were able to raise that amount and there's 40 million left over, it would only need to be 4% return on that $40 million on an annual basis to cover the deficit that we're describing. So again, very comfortable that we would be able to cover the deficit. Finally, one of the things that I thought was, Mike said this the other day, and I thought it was really important to summarize their commitment to what we're doing. And it's really that even if we are unable to accomplish the philanthropic plan, that they are committed because they know that this is something that's important to them and that we will be able to execute also as a university. So in summary, because of our ability to mitigate the risks, which we have done, we have an incredible collaborative partner with a very strong balance sheet and great operations. I am an advocate, and I think that this is a strong and viable financial plan, and I can take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Associate Dean Siebert. Really appreciate that. Before we turn into any discussion, and we will have discussion of any questions you may have, I'm wondering if there's a motion to recommend the approval of the academic affiliation agreement.
Motion to.
Second. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait. Let's have the discussion first. Wow, you think I was new to Robert's rules, but not, yeah. Really efficient. Okay, done. No, please, any
What a
questions?
salesman. What a salesman.
Any questions, yeah. Yeah, Regent Verhalen.
Thanks, Chair Wheeler. I don't have a question, but I did just want to point out, for purposes of our overview, we know we have a lot of steps in our governance process, and thank you for walking us through some of the financial pieces of this, because that is so important to moving this forward, right? It's not just the commitment, it's also how are we going to pay for it, make sure that we're being financially responsible. This is a multi-step process, and that is really important to our oversight and our interactions, both with the medical school here, but also with CentraCare and how we do this. And I just wanted to make sure we pointed out, there is a section in here, so even if we move forward approving the agreement, the affiliation agreement itself, there is a second provision that if the final detailed financial plan that comes before us is not sufficient for our approval, and there's a cure period after we make that determination, but if it's not sufficient, we can terminate the agreement if we feel that the financial underpinnings of this agreement are not sufficient enough for all of our comfort in moving forward. And so I just, for the sake of transparency, wanted to be really clear as we move through the process.
Right. No, I think that's hugely important, Regent Verhalen, and that was something raised by us. We want to make sure that we go with this wholeheartedly excited, but we also have the fiduciary responsibilities to make sure it's sustainable for all those served. And so thank you for underscoring that point. I know Chair Mayron has been underscoring that to us as well. Yes.
And along those lines, the original plan was, with the assumption this gets approved here and approved then at the board meeting tomorrow, that the financial plan would then be, the entire agreement, but the financial plan would be presented to the Finance and Ops Committee. And originally, we were planning on a December review and a February decision. The direction we're planning to go is to accelerate that. And in the conversations that we've had with Mr. Siebert and with Dean Toller is that they can be ready to go. They're pretty ready to go right now to talk about it financially, but the whole board, we haven't socialized the whole board on it. And so the thought is that we will likely have a special meeting in November that will address this issue and perhaps issues related to the presidential search, and that we will then bring it for action and vote at the December meeting. So the goal is to get that financial piece in place and be able to move on with the full commitment of the board.
Great. Any other questions at all or concerns? And again, so let's see, the next steps as outlined were to bring it to the Finance and Operations Committee, probably in a special meeting for final approval in December. And that process that Regent Verhalen and Chair Mayron go is really important to us being able to exercise our authority and have the whole board very knowledgeable about what is being proposed and have the confidence in that. So that's probably the most important point we want to raise here. And we also want to get it approved in a timely fashion because the excitement is out there also for prospective students. And to be able to let them know about this program, we want to make sure we do our work first. Anything else? Any comments or questions? Anything further, Dean Toller?
Just my profound gratitude for the diligence of the process and keeping the passion, which is unquestioned and unquestionable, I think, for remedy of the geographic maldistribution of the doctors in the state of Minnesota, but pairing this with the financial and operation diligence and deference to the process of the Board of Regents. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Any further discussion at all?
I'll just,
Yeah,
just
please,
add,
Regent
that I
Johnson.
wholeheartedly support this. The idea I think we've all been very enthused about, as we indicated from the beginning. We have really begun our due diligence on this, gone through things, looked in the financial. Just be assured that that's happening and everything is be done in that sense. And I think the process that's laid out with taking this step now to go with affiliation and then really do our work in the next couple of months and bring this to the board in December is a sound, wise, and positive step and a good plan.
Dean Toller.
Chair Wheeler, can I, ask that we give a couple of minutes to my partner, Dr. Holman?
Sure, certainly. Dr. Ken Holman, CEO of Centric Care, approaching now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Let's start with appreciation. I think we all recognize we live in challenging times, and the notion of appreciation is important as we understand that where we as leaders lead for tomorrow. So thank you. Thank you for your consideration and support to date for all this great work. I'd like to thank our legislators at both the state and the federal level for their magnificent support. To Bill and the team, just marvelous, great collaboration. Emily Ainsley, the remarkable work is just really positive. I'd like to thank the remarkable communities that we live in. There's this notion in outstate Minnesota, greater Minnesota, rural Minnesota, about giving your best acre. How many of you have heard that before? So in the early days, when America is settled, there's a problem for immigrants, and that is how do you support the infrastructure for the citizens that move there, whether you're from wherever part of the world you're from. And it's called giving your best acre. They gave their best acre to build a school. They gave their best acre to build a city hall. They came together to give their best acres to build Main Street. And so I view this as a shared commitment by the land grant institution, University of Minnesota, 150-year history. And Centric Care, actually a titch older, going back to the Benedictine sisters in St. Cloud in 1858. They gave their best acre. They gave their best acre to create opportunities for tomorrow. And that's what this is really about. And the reason why I mention that is that the support that we receive in outstate Minnesota, greater Minnesota, is remarkable. We talked about the philanthropic campaign. As of yesterday, we're at $10 million and going north in 3.5 weeks. It is just astounding. When I go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, Rotary, et cetera, just remarkable support. Retired physicians in greater Minnesota are calling and wanting to be mentors. And so this notion of how we create seeds of opportunity for the next 150 years is really what this is about. Appreciation to all the educational institutions that have reached out to us. St. John's and St. Ben's, St. Cloud State, St. Cloud Technical College, Riverland Community College, all of them want to be a part of this notion of how we create the next generation. How do we educate our citizens, the kids? We have hired a principal from Sartell to start networking with all of our elementary schools. He's seen 6,000 kids in outstate Minnesota in the last few weeks to say, how do we create a positive best acre for tomorrow? And so appreciation is really important. So thank you to all the folks that have made this what it is today. And then I would finish with this, Chair Wheeler. Why? The why is always important. We must do our due diligence. It's expected. We want to make good decisions and be good stewards. The whys, from a Centric Care perspective, are part of a broader plan that we call Making Rural Life Healthier. And if you focus on those, making is active. We're not looking, we're not standing by, we're doing something. Rural is not meant to describe or decide whether St. Cloud is rural or not, or Wilmer. or Redwood Falls, or Long Prairie, or Perham. Rural is meant to be, that's who we are, right? Not a label. It defines the kind of life that we live together. And then life is something that happens outside hospitals and clinics, right? In the communities we serve, we're the major employer. We're the major economic engine. We partner with churches and United Way and everybody else to say, how do we make rural life healthier? And that's indeed the center point of the medical school affiliation and all the academic work that we're doing, as well as the many collaborations we have with private industry in our greater community and our immigrant populations. So thank you, and the why is really central to what we're doing. With that, I'd be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yes, Regent Turner.
I just want to make the observation that it doesn't surprise me how excited they are in rural Minnesota, because they have had to, and I always choke up about this because I've observed it, they have had to live through decades of decline of healthcare access. So it doesn't surprise me in the least. And having relatives in rural Minnesota, you can bet they're going to be there with their coin and their labor. I will say that I was in Rochester yesterday, and I had a conversation with a neurosurgeon and a family practice surgeon who are from Indiana, and they were here to kind of snap up some of our doctors. So just so you know, doctors are short of supply everywhere, and you get, from one state to another where they're. So anything we can do to help get more physicians.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Regent Turner. Any other questions for Dr. Holman? Well, I will just say, the gratitude goes back to you, because we together, if this gets finally approved holistically, we together are serving the public interest of the state of Minnesota and greater Minnesota in a profound way, and which needs to happen. So we thank you too for the collaborative effort you and your team have put forward on this and what it means to so many. Thank you. With that, I think finally maybe I can call for a vote without any further discussion. I'll ask those all in favor to say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. All right, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Well, we're turn to you again, Vice President Toller. Yeah. So next we're going to hear an overview of the mHealth Fairview Partnership. Vice President Toller, if you'll proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Thank you, committee, and thank you, the whole Board of Regents. I was asked, understandably, to update the group on the state of mHealth Fairview, of the clinical partnership that we have, and I'd like to open up this as a series of discussions rather than one definitive one. This, I'll go through why are we doing this, how are we doing this, but the main point is really to trigger thinking and leadership directionality of the Board of Regents and this committee, so that we have, from your questions, we can gather data and directions to what next is important for the discussions that we have. I think that, I'd like to start with how wide and deep our commitment to the state of Minnesota is. The university, I think, and it's difficult to see sometimes from within, you have to really go outside to the greater Minnesota, outside nationally, to see how enormously meaningful the benefit of the University of Minnesota and its clinical enterprise in all its 6 health science schools is, in fact, on the lives and livelihoods of people in Minnesota, and how our patients from around the state and outside of the state, as I said before, 50% of my patients come from outside of Minnesota, nationally and internationally, because we do something that nobody else can and can do. So the vision for the mHealth Fairview was that it would spread the platform that we call academic medicine. And what academic medicine to me means better outcomes, better care. That means that we take the knowledge of the pathology of the disease and physiology of health and understand it in a way that we can humanize it and bring it to the bedside, bring it to the community, bring it to the intensive care unit, and in this way change the standards of care and improve the quality of life, length of life in many ways for people who are beneficiaries of this. And it's always a patient-clinician partnership. It's never unilateral. We learn from our patients more than you know, and the clinicians in the room would agree perhaps with me that I learned from my patients how to live my life and how to do things in the scientific realm of the university. So the vision for the mHealth Fairview was to spread this kind of thinking, this academic health, this academic medicine thinking across the whole Fairview system. That is important because the previous agreement that we had with Fairview Health was focused more on the campus itself, on the University of Minnesota Medical Center. This was meant to be an amplification of that virtue that we bring to everybody in the state, and it also has been intended to recruit and retain the best of the best. And the physicians, the University of Minnesota physicians, it's our clinical practice, and it has been designed as being a destination practice. It has been designed to be the workshop for the state, to be desired by clinicians of any flavor on the clinical team, to be the place where they want to work. So Regent Turner, when you said that the doctors are in short supply, yes, they are. And that's why it's so important that we have something that others don't, so that we can offer this to them as not always the best paid job, but the best job, which everybody knows entails more of the professional and personal than just the amount of dollars that one gets at the end of the month. The other aspect of that has been to reach out to the community and have the community doctors associate with the mHealth Fairview. We really paid a lot of attention to the private groups, to people that are not academicians per se, because I think that there is the best equilibrium, the best balance if all of these groups are working together. So we organized the care around the patient. That's another thing. We can have a longer discussion about the United States healthcare system and the business of healthcare, which is very different from care delivery, as probably people know. But the idea here was to focus where the value is truly relevant, which is at the bedside, at the patient contacts, as Chair Wheeler and others, Regent Johnson and everybody else knows. So what we intended is to build a system of what we call service lines. So rather than a patient going to different departments and different specialties, we travel with the patient through her journey in breast cancer or in other realms, and the clinical services sort of come to her to assist rather than the other way around. And the improvement, and I'm grateful to Mr. Herford to actually have been imprinted from his previous location, that this actually does work, was the dyad leadership of that service line. What I mean by dyad is that there are two people. One is a clinical person, physician typically, and the other one is a Fairview operative. So we are pairing together the knowledge of medicine with the knowledge of how supply chain works, revenue cycle works, and so forth, and they make these decisions together. And this is really important because the complementarity of that decision making, in my opinion, presents the high quality, high velocity decisions that are needed in the clinical enterprise. We have also shown that that works. That's going to be sort of my punchline for this presentation, that over the last 5 years of existence of what we call definitive agreement, which is what I just described to you, we have shown that we have improved in quality, we have improved in productivity, we have gained market share in 7 out of 10 of these service lines, which, as everybody knows, Twin Cities and surrounding are very saturated healthcare market, very competitive. And for some reasons, it is a good thing that it is competitive. But if you can gain market share because of the high quality, because of the innovative care, the conclusion for me is that this is the differentiator. This is because we offer what others cannot offer. And again, we work with every healthcare system. We work with everyone in the community. And I am grateful that the University of Minnesota has provided the permissive environment for our clinicians and leaders to actually be able to do that. This slide shows a picture of what it looks like. It's a little busy, but in practical terms, just look at the central circle and then the surrounding edges. What's in the circle and what's outside of the circle needs to demonstrate how this works in practical terms. What it means is that we are two separate organizations. We are not integrated. We are partnered under the mHealth Fairview, which is not a name of the company. This is a brand. And the brand, as I see it, the Block M, one of the most desired brands in the state of Minnesota and in the upper Midwest, I think, this is a symbol. This is like a flag. It's not about the flag. It's the people who salute to the flag. It is the Block M, and the mHealth Fairview in this sense is meant to be representative of the care that we provide: compassionate, high quality, high safety, coordinated longitudinally, and so forth in these clinical environments. The outer edges are components of the M physicians on the left side and Fairview on the right side that are complementary to the circle in the middle, where we coalesce around these service lines that I described to you, but they are led by their individual organizations. It's important that this has been designed, and some people in the room, have been absolutely phenomenal in this. Again, General Counsel Peterson and AC Counsel Kratz, among many, when we designed this, some 5.5 years ago. It's important that we are not integrated into one system, because if we were, we would not be able to serve our mission for the state of Minnesota. We are supposed to serve everyone. That's why that design around the business of how we interact with each other is not exclusive partnership, exclusive joint integrated partnership, but rather a partnership that respects the unique functions and unique phenotypes of these two organizations, or even three if you add University of Minnesota to the mix. The practice of our university is called University of Minnesota Physicians, or M Physicians for short, and this is the practice plan that is governed by the Regents policy, and it is to my knowledge, it is the largest multi-specialty independent practice in the state of Minnesota. And I'll talk more about the M physicians at future meetings. But for today, I think it's important to realize how many physicians and other health professionals we have been able to attract and retain and recruit, and how many subspecialties and specialties we are able to cover. And the fact that all these physicians, they work for the university. The brand works externally for the patients and communities. It works internally as well. What I mean by that is that if you ask any of my docs, any of my nurses, pharmacists, anybody, they will say, I work for the university. They don't necessarily identify with the location where they practice, but rather they see that the guiding principle of their professional and personal, because everything in medicine is personal, in my opinion, is funneled through the deference to the university and the legacy of the university and loyalty of these talented physicians and clinicians to the mission of the University of Minnesota. The M Physicians has its own board of directors. The dean is the chair of the board, and the CEO of the practice is a vice dean of the medical school. This again came to me, in one of these memorable letters that we all, I think, have that cannot be forgotten. In April 2017, this board, sent us a letter and said, you better come closer, the practice and the medical school, because we don't want to see that duplication, and we want to see a very, sincere, genuine amalgamation of these two bodies. The major financial contract of M Physicians is between the University of Minnesota Physicians and Fairview Health. This is where we provide majority of the benefits to the system. This is where we realize the talents and hard work of our clinicians. And I can attest that the metrics of productivity, of quality, and again, as I said, the market shares and the job satisfactions are the key strategic indicators that we are following all the time. And I know that with the current strategic plan of the university that the university is working on, I believe this is the first mention that this practice goal is to be a destination practice. I've mentioned the service lines several times. These are the list of them. They are again co-led by a executive from Fairview and academic physicians from the UMP, and they are intended to make these decisions together. I'm going to come back to this in a little different ways and say that there are a lot of decisions in healthcare, as we all know, that are not medical. This is not what we are training medical students to do typically, when they are learning about function and malfunction of the human body. But all the decisions that are made around the patient are clinical in one way or another. What I mean by that is that it really does matter what is in the intensive care unit and how it is organized. What I mean by that, it really matters, how, from the medical standpoint, from the, what the flow in the clinic is. How does patient react to certain things? How does clinician organize her information and data? So a lot of decisions in the clinical enterprise are non-medical, but they are better informed by somebody who actually knows what a good OR looks like, what a good ICU looks like, and what a good clinic looks like, even though she may not know all the sticker prices of all the supply chain parts and how one goes about revenue cycle and so forth. So we are looking at these service lines with the it's sort of like a joint operations plan. It is the way we communicate with each other and the way we communicate to the community and to the patients so that, again, we can derive from that decision-making a care that is what patients really want. And in my practice and in my experience, both personal and deferred, it is low costs, improvement of the coordination of care longitudinally, and inclusion of the determinants of how that can be pharmaceutical, they can be medical, they can be behavioral, and they can be social. And there are very few places that can do this, and the academic health, the academic medicine, in my opinion, is the solution for how to organize ourselves better. An important part of the 2018 agreement, the one that I mentioned several times, was the system support for academics. This has been guaranteed in the addition to a monetary arrangement that we get for the first time in history of this agreement and history of this medical school and its medical school practice on the level of our peers in academic health systems and academic medical centers across the United States. We also were able to get a position of the chief academic officer in the C-suite of Fairview. That's somebody who has a dual report to the dean and the CEO of Fairview, and we will be able to channel again the impact, the delivery is the business end of this. So we've been able to increase enormously the number of people who are enrolled on clinical trials. As an oncologist, I can tell you that the difference between a person who is on a trial and is not on a trial and is treated as a standard of care is sadly, 10 to 15% in survival. So the clinical trials is not an experimentation of any kind. It is the diligence and deference to the best practices in how to treat a patient or how to go to the community and externalize some of the abilities that we have. The truth also is that as good partners, we have taken that what we call academic support and put it in a lot of items that have not been really, in an academic purview. What I mean by that is we paid salaries for competitive salaries for our clinicians. We have bought equipment to the NICU. We have We have redesigned and improved resident call rooms. We have been it has been necessary to support the bone marrow transplant database, which is how we organize our data. So there have been a lot of things that were done in a true partnership with Fairview that were not intended necessarily for the academic pursuits per se. And I think that it is your judgment, but it is my assessment that the impact of these maneuvers, of the focus on academic health and academic medicine and supporting it in this way has shown in the rankings of the medical school, has shown not just in the rankings of the NIH dollars. I'm going to repeat myself and say that we are top 10 medical school for the first time in 30 years. This is also the quality metrics. We are 20th out of 116 in quality in the United States. We moved from 70s 2 years before, 55 last year to 20, which is the jump that the Vizient, which is the company who arranges the data, found so remarkable that we had gotten a Rising Star Award, which you get if you jump 20 spots and you end up in the top 25. Very few can do this. So,
Dean Toller, I'm just going to remind you that we just have a few minutes left, about 7 minutes left, and I know there might be some questions and discussions. So
thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So it worked. We believe that the partnership has also been a great benefit for the system, and that's indicated on this slide. I mentioned the quality and safety outcomes, increased market share, patient satisfaction, and this is equally important that I make it very clear that the credit goes to everyone. Our partners at Fairview, our clinicians and clinical teams and administrators on the UMP side, everybody, we have done this together. This is not one or the other. I've added a slide on the facilities. There has been a lot of discussion about the facilities. A key factor for growth of our practice and the system is not just the size, but the condition of the facilities that we have, mainly our 2 adult hospitals. And a great deal of work has been done already. We have moved to the single occupancy rooms. We have improved our emergency department and so forth. But it's important, I think, that the University of Minnesota Medical Center is composed of 3 hospitals and 1 ambulatory care center, and the majority of the physicians are the M physicians, about 98%, and that conglomerate of the center contributes about 57% of revenue to the system. Our contracts end up in 2018, 2020. They started 2018. They go through the 2026, and for this year, we need to decide whether to serve a notice by the end of the year, whether we renegotiate our contracts, whether we open them up to improvements. As you know, since the Sanford merger discussion has been stopped, we have been meeting with Fairview leaders regularly, and we are looking for a path forward after the 2026. It's no secret that Fairview is in financial troubles, and in that sense, our discussions have been and partnerships have been strained over last year. I, however, think that the joint clinical enterprise is a very good idea, and not just a good idea, but it's a good executed idea. It works in many ways, and the last part, Chair Buehler, that I'll say is that the discussions are continuing. We are meeting weekly. The focus is on the overall interest and the priorities. Our approach has been centered around the 5-point system that General Counsel Peterson yesterday reviewed in the task force. And the 3 important things in that is that we are committed to the partnership that is designed on the basis of academic health system. The reason for that, I think that I have reviewed before. We are also looking at restructure and research of governance and control of the University of Minnesota Medical Center. And the aim is to have a distinct UMMC, that the facilities are the tools that work for the public mission. They work for the public. The ownership of the facilities is a secondary issue in all of this. The primary issue is the mission itself. The Fairview with us, we are working on the strategic plan for upgrading the facilities, and we are also mindful of the dedication of all the professionals across the whole mHealth Fairview to make it the best of class care. And we owe to these people that we do this right, and that we do this as good ancestors for the long-term benefits, not just the short-term reactive way. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dean Toller. Is there any questions or any discussion? And as Dean Toller said at the outset, this is the first of many, opportunities for this committee and to understand this relationship and what's proposed for the future. Well, more to follow then. Thank you very much, Dean Toller. Appreciate that. So and very related, we'll move to the next agenda item then, which is an update on the Governor's Task Force on Academic Health at the University of Minnesota. And for that, I'll ask Interim President Jeff Ettinger to lead us off.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Wheeler and members. We were grateful to learn about the university's representation on the Governor's Task Force to help determine the future of our health sciences programs at the university. We appreciate the appointments of you, Chair Wheeler, and your willingness to serve in this capacity, of Dr. Jacob Tolar, our Vice President for Clinical Affairs and our Dean of our Medical School, and Dean Connie Delaney of the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. The four of us have actually also met with a number of other initial applicants from the University of Minnesota system who are also interested in serving on the task force. And we wanted to have the chance to listen to their potential priorities for the task force and indeed have plans to have follow-up meetings with them as well. The task force, as you mentioned, met again for the first time last Thursday, met again just yesterday, with upcoming meetings scheduled over the coming months. And at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Vice President Tolar for an update regarding the task force.
Chair Wheeler, Mr. President, thank you. The meetings are very good. I think, they are very focused on what matters and what does not. Chair Malcolm of the task force has been phenomenal. We have known her well when she was a commissioner. She truly is able to keep the focus and sense of scope where things need to go. At the same time, she's masterful in allowing for different views and different ideas come forward, especially I think in the first phase of the work of the task force. There has been a lot of discussion yesterday on rural, as Chair Wheeler, mentioned, rural healthcare and the priorities, in greater Minnesota. There's been a lot of attention to the workforce. What does the workforce mean? How is it differentiated? How can it be improved? What is the pipeline? What is the quality metrics and how one goes about this? To this, I would add that the strength and the quality of the clinical enterprise at the University of Minnesota is the workforce development. They are not two separate issues. This is one issue. And our 6 health science schools have been, again, extremely relevant to the buildup of the whole clinical team, not just the physicians alone. There have been comments that are sort of bridging to my previous comments on mHealth Fairview and how the Fairview relationship sort of flows into this. I think it's fair to say that the enterprise of the university in its clinical ways is of interest to the task force, but it is not the focus of the task force. It's a narrow but deep distinction, I think, that we are keeping in mind. And I think that the solid foundation for all our health sciences is going to be foundational for us to deliver on the state goals and priorities. We have reviewed a couple things yesterday, and I'm grateful to Vice Deans Crawford and Rosenberg for presenting what the task force asked us at the first meeting, which was the update on the 2015 Blue Ribbon Commission, which is the last time a similar task force has been organized by the governor. They have done a very good job and showed clearly how relevant it was that the state invested in the university, and also equally importantly, I think that the university has delivered on that promise and has used and safeguarded these funds appropriately, in fact, amplified them in many different ways. The last part of the presentation has been done by General Counsel Peterson, and he reviewed the 5-point plan that, as everybody knows, was born out of the concern about the Sanford merger, but really brought into attention, in words of Chair Malcolm, the necessity to relook at this decade, to relook at the position and of the university and the mission of the state, the responsibility of each, and the ability to actually improve on the care models of the public mission and the service to the state. Chair Wheeler, I am open to your direction on how we want to guide the.
Maybe I'll just make a couple of comments too. So since the last time we were together, the membership of that committee has been named, and as President Ettinger, Interim President Ettinger said, I think we couldn't be more pleased with the component of the people who are around the table. So that's good. And we have two former governors acting as advisors. So Governor Tim Pawlenty and Governor Mark Dayton are acting as advisors. It's, again, emphasizing the importance of this to the entire state of Minnesota, which I think is a very, very good thing. So that's going to. At one of our first meetings, Governor Pawlenty said, the healthcare system is maxed out. And I think that Mary Ruth and I would probably say yes to that, and it's challenging. And then how does the university help support it? And it's seen that it supports it in a profound way. And how does it, and General Counsel Peterson said, how do we serve the public interest best? What's unique about the university to be able to do so? What kind of partnerships do we need? We heard about two of the partnerships today. What kind of partnerships do we need to do so? And then how does it work economically to support the teaching, the research, and the clinical care that we want to provide and to make a healthier Minnesota for all? So that's what we're doing. So again, just to remind people, by January 15th, short timeline, the task force is to have some recommendations about how academic health, particularly obviously how the university's academic health serves best the state in this for the future generations to follow. And they will come out with we will come out with some recommendations for that. And then we will take that in, obviously, as a university community to say, okay, how specifically then do we act within in fidelity with those recommendations? So that's just to outline kind of the process that's going on. We meet about every 2 weeks, so that's that. I will turn now for discussion on this item, and first to Regent Hinch.
Thanks, Chair Wheeler. Just a quick question on, so what precipitated the committee was the current events. And so would you say the committee is looking at solving the current events that we're currently in, or is it more of a long-term futuristic look of where we want to end up?
Dean Toller?
Chair Wheeler, Regent Hipsch, it's both. It's in fact the intellectual might of the task force that it recognized from the very first meeting that this is a long term. This is not about doing more of the same, more quickly, more expensively, more. It's not that. They also realized that, and I was very impressed by that, that there has to be a sequence. That some things need to be done early, like stabilizing academics at the University of Minnesota, and some will be, again, not my term, Chair Malcolm's term, in the parking lot or parking garage. They are not less important, they are equally important, but they can only be accomplished in the sequence for coming from again, stabilizing the academics and then moving to the things that are of paramount import as well.
Just want to thank both of you for serving on the committee. I think it's really a good way to solve these problems that we have, so thank you.
Thank you, Regent Hinch. Thank you. Regent and Chair Mayron.
Yes, what's on the agenda for the next meeting? So who's going to present and what's going to be the focus of the next meeting?
The next meeting, we are, it's not final because it has a very nice dynamism. Mm-hmm. Like this week, we got the assignments about 36 hours before the meeting, and I again relied on a phenomenal team.
I'm so glad you don't sleep.
I do. I'm just trying to be effective with my time.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a benefit in, as I mentioned for this committee at the beginning, that the questions drive the data, the information that the task force wants, rather than us coming to this in some way, pre-formed, minds of this. So the asks were, let's review the funds flow, and not in a funds flow for the medical school, for the practice, for the university, and how it connects, which, as you know, is complicated with other healthcare systems. So we're going to focus on the undergraduate medical education and graduate medical education, which are both funded from dozens of different sources, which has changed over time. So my directive from Chair Malcolm has been that we do not focus on individual dollars, on the numbers, but really more on the flow, on the operation concept. What is the contribution to each of these buckets? The second task for us was to present a dashboard that will look at the rankings of the medical school over the last 5 or 10 years, not only in research, that everybody knows about that, but several people ask about the clinical ones, and we have good things to report on this. We are second in Twin Cities and fourth in the state. We've moved up, as a UMMC. We are 32nd in cancer in the nation and 40th in ear, nose and throat. So we have a number of other, and the quality I mentioned already. So the dashboard was the other one. And then Chair Malcolm asked about presenting care models and models how the academic medical centers in the United States interact with their healthcare systems. And we are greatly helped by AAMC and the Council of Deans that I sit on, because they had about 4 years ago, they put together a brilliant report that talks about exactly the funding streams and the models, how these relationships can be done. 3 items as far as I know.
Can I follow, if I can
Please.
follow? Is there an assignment to other members of the committee, or is the assignment solely directed to the university to provide information along the lines of what you discussed?
Chair Wheeler.
I'm trying to get a sense of the assignment to the committee at large at this point.
Chair Wheeler, Regent. Mayor Ron, yes, there are assignments to others. The good examples would be that Dr. Walsh from Hennepin is going to review the graduate medical education funding, and Dr. Herman, CEO of Essentia, will review rural healthcare in Minnesota.
Yes, Regent Turner.
Do you foresee coming out of this task force, because I believe the legislature starts in February, do you foresee having some concrete tasks or bills that might come from this task force, some kind of asks from the legislature? When you talk about short-term and long-term, it just comes to mind like telehealth and having that more efficient everywhere. And of course, that means more dollars for infrastructure, for broadband, et cetera. So is this some of your goal to come out with a little honey-do list for the legislature?
Yeah, I think the timing of the conclusion of the
Is
task
for
force
that, right?
is for that purpose. I don't know, Regent Turner, how this is. We realize we're nesting academic health within a larger healthcare ecosystem, right? And I don't know yet how much, but part of this was to position for recognizing and the value of the university and making recommendations about how we can enhance that value. So it's focused more on the academic health, and then what asks of the legislature might come from those recommendations and our discernment. So is that,
Yes,
Dean
ma'am.
Toller, anything else to add? Okay. And President Energy, or anything else you'd add to that? Okay. Any other discussion? Well, we have that, I think, on our work plan as basically a standing agenda item for this committee because things are moving quickly. And, there are advantages. We've all said this of having a short timeline too for this work because a lot gets done relatively quickly. So more to follow here. Is there any additional business that should go before the committee? Hearing none, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you very much.